That's going to depend, but you're not alone. A digital revolution has been happening during the coronavirus, and we've all got used to different ways of working. And some people are extremely anxious, so as it to be a mental illness. Some people just feel overwhelmed by the thought of returning back to the workplace. Now, what you can do is going to depend on whether you are classed as disabled. So anxiety can be a disability just the same as any other illness. And if you are classed as being disabled, then you will get some protection from the Equality Act, and your employer would have to make a reasonable adjustment for you to return to work. Anxiety can be classed as a disability like any other illness, but the test is whether it has a substantial effect on your ability to carry out day-to-day activities, and it has to last for 12 months or more, or be likely to last for 12 months or more. If you meet this test, then you will be protected under the Equality Act. Well, a good place to start is your GP. They will have a record of your medical history, and you can explain the effects that your anxiety is having on you, particularly in relation to work, and they can give you a report saying whether or not you meet the criteria to have the protection from the Equality Act. They may do, but not always. But even if they do charge, it's usually a small amount, but it's best to check with them first before asking for the report. Well, then you would go to your employer and ask them for something called a reasonable adjustment. So this could be anything that makes it easier for you to work with your disability. So that could be carrying on working from home as you have been. It might be something like varying your hours so that you don't meet the rush hour on public transport, which we know is a concern for people. Or there might be something else that's personal to you and the way that your disability operates that would suit you and just make it easier for you to stay in work. It depends on whether it's deemed reasonable. Now, reasonable is going to be determined by the nature of your work, the size of your employer and the resources that are available to them, and how your request fits into that. So it's important that before you make your request that you think very carefully about what would work for you and your particular job. It's good to put the request in writing, and once you've made it, then the employer needs to consider it and get back with you, either agreeing or proposing something different. Ultimately, you could make a claim to the employment tribunal. If your employer has refused a reasonable adjustment, then they could be guilty of disability discrimination, and the tribunal is allowed to make a declaration and or pay you compensation if you've been discriminated again. And again, the test that they would look at is whether your request was reasonable in the circumstances of your job. Well, there are options available to you. You can make a request for flexible working. Now, people often think that this can only be made by people who are parents or carers, but anyone can make an application for flexible working. You just have to have worked for the employer for 26 weeks continuously and not have made such a request in the previous 12 months. You can vary or change your hours to suit you, and that might help, for example, again with things like avoiding rush hour traffic. You could ask to continue to work at home, and there are only 8 business reasons that an employer can refuse your request for flexible working. Now, those are going to scroll on the screen below, but obviously if you have been working at home successfully all through the coronavirus crisis, it can be that much harder for the employer to say that this isn't feasible or doesn't meet business needs.
Do I have to send that in writing, or can I just phone up and say I'm not coming to work?
Okay. Well, it's usually better to put things in writing, and it's quite a serious step not turning up to work, so it's best to get some advice before you take this step. Now, many trade unions have template letters around this issue, and a shop steward could give you advice. Otherwise, you could phone someone like ACAS, and we'll put the number below. Or you could speak to a solicitor who can give you advice and help you draft a letter. It's important to remember in all of this that you're not alone, that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people have the same issues and worries as you do. And reaching out is a very positive thing to do. And it may be that your situation is resolved with a bit of advice and a bit of negotiation with your employer. Now, there are many organisations who can help you if you do need advice. I've mentioned ACAS. They can help you. They have a phone number which will be scrolling below. There's also a trade union. If you belong to one, a shop steward can often help you or access legal advice on your behalf. There's always a solicitor, but you would have to pay for that. And Mind also operates a legal helpline for people who face discrimination at work because of their mental health problems. The phone numbers will be scrolling below. We also provide an email service for those who would prefer to write to us, and the email is below. But do remember that the sooner you reach out, the sooner you're more able to resolve your problem. In all of this, it's important to remember that you're not alone. Hundreds and thousands, if not millions of people have concerns and worries about returning to work after the coronavirus crisis. And actually, it's a very positive thing to reach out and try and get some help. There are plenty of organisations out there who can give you some advice and some support while you try and resolve these problems. So ACAS can offer legal advice. They have a phone number which will be scrolling below. You can also talk to your trade union or your shop steward. They can often give you practical help or access legal advice for you. You can always pay for a solicitor who can help you formulate your legal problem and maybe even write a letter for you. But also remember that Mind has a legal helpline, and this helps people who are facing discrimination at work because of their mental health problems. Now, we have a phone number which again is on the screen below, but we also have an email service which some people prefer, and the email will be on the screen below too. The sooner you reach out, the sooner you might be able to resolve your problems. We want everyone to stay safe and stay well.